petroleum-based products, fossil fuels, all those different things. Then we talk about the erosion of our shorelines. We talk about the erosion, whether it's on the sea, whether it's in the river, and then it's happening up in the mountains. The snow caps aren't there anymore. And then we look at the flooding. Because the snow caps are melting so fast, both in the spring and in the fall, we're just bombarded with all these things. But the one thing that is very consistent, no matter what reservation we go to, whether it's in the United States or abroad, we look at indigenous communities, and indigenous communities are at the front line of it over and over and over again. And the one thing that we have the biggest problem doing is finding a seat at the table. Right there, man, right there. So I went this last year to the COP28, which was in Dubai. I went to the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt last year as with a media pass. I was hired to film and photograph a group of indigenous spiritual leaders who were part of a group called the Earthrise Collective. And some of you may have seen the presentation I did on that before. And so I went back this year as part of a delegation. And this delegation is a delegation of wisdom keepers. And what we were doing was sharing ancestral knowledge and indigenous teachings. And the one thing that we found over and over again is that people, they really kind of get overwhelmed when it comes to climate change, when it comes to trying to figure out how we're going to do this, because we're running out of time very, very fast. And you know, when I was sitting there at the Global Climate Summit in Dubai this last year, it was really, to me, it was so disturbing, because we would see these people get up and talk over and over again, and then we would have representatives from big oil, more specifically from the UAE, more specifically Emirati, sitting there in the audience. And it's like, how do you convince these guys to climb down off their stack of money, stop counting their Rolexes, to figure out there is not one of us that will survive this impending climate collapse? Not one of us. Not you, not your children, not your grandchildren, not your great-grandchildren. You won't have any. It's that simple. And you can go and do what Mark Zuckerberg just did. You know, he spent, what was $187 million to buy 1,600 acres in Hawaii to build himself a bunker. You could go and do something like that. But what kind of life is that? You know, is that the kind of life that you want to share with your children and grandchildren? When we talk about ancestral knowledge, we talk about indigenous justice, we talk about all these things over and over again, the one thing, as I mentioned before, that we find is we have a hard time getting a seat at the table. And when I talk about indigenous wisdom having the solutions to climate change, the way that I sum it up on more of a local level, to touch you here in the inland Northwest, my ancestors, as a Spokane tribal member, I also have ancestry in the Kalispel, in the Nez Perce, and the Iroquois. But if I just boil it down to the Spokane and the Kalispel, my ancestors here, they lived on our ancestral homelands for over 10,000 years here. You know, when we go back through the history books and we hear the history of things, like, I'll give you a good example. When colonists first came over to this country, they said that they landed on pristine, untouched forests. Pristine! Oh my God. It's not that they were untouched. It's that the indigenous people of this land were stewards of this land. And we looked at Mother Earth. We looked at Mother Nature holistically. It wasn't something that was separate. It wasn't a cash crop for us to go harvest. It was a part of us. It was a part of all of who we were. And we lived in a spirit of reciprocity. And you only take if you plan to give. And you only take what you need, rather than harvesting cash crops and building these capitalistic systems that just take and take and take and take. One of the stories I always like to talk about is when Lewis and Clark came to this area. They said the salmon runs were so thick, you could walk across the river on the backs of salmon. When they walked across that river on the backs of salmon, they weren't talking about the Spokane River. They were talking about the Columbia River. If you've ever driven from here to Seattle, when you get down into Vantage, if you could imagine walking across that river on the backs of salmons, that's what they're talking about. You know, when I talk to people about salmon fishing, you know, Upper Columbia United Tribes and DR over here, these guys are heavily involved in salmon restoration in this area. When I talk to people about salmon fishing, they go, oh yes, I would love to go to Alaska one day to fish salmon. Well, I would love to be able to fish those same fish runs here like they used to be. Our tribe, the Spokane tribe, used to go down here to the Spokane Falls, and they would fish for 100 days a year. Of that 100 days, we would pull 1,000 fish a day with an average of a 30-pound salmon, getting as large as 110 pounds. 110-pound salmon. When they would fish through the tributaries, they'd go out on the backs of horses and they'd spearfish, and you'd see them right away. And the tails of the fish would be dragging from the saddle horns of the horse. If you can imagine these massive fish. You don't have to go to Alaska to do that. We can do that right here. These guys are leading the efforts to do this. It's something that we face over and over again. We had salmon chiefs that would go out and they would regulate how much salmon we would take out. You know, when the fish wheels came and the canneries came and they were pulling fish, millions and millions of pounds down into the Columbia River, taking out all these salmon way overfishing it. That's not what we did. Our salmon chiefs would go out and say, okay, we took enough of the day, let those fish keep going. Let them keep going by so they can go up and spawn, so they'll be back next year. And we knew that, and we utilized that wisdom for over 10,000 years. It wasn't until about 150 years ago that we were introduced to the industrial age and sawmills and all these different things. People coming down and cutting down our old growth cedars to make tables. Make tables and chairs and furniture and all this fun, wonderful stuff that we need. That's when we started really starting to understand what was happening to us. And we started working on things like the restoration of the Spokane River. Our tribe, the Spokane Tribe, it's going on about 2 decades now. We set out to put water quality standards on the Spokane River. And now these water quality standards are challenged over and over again. Some of the water quality standards, actually the water quality standards we have here on the Spokane River are the highest in the country. And they're actually so high that the technology isn't there to measure the parts per quadrillion that we set. And we did that with the anticipation that the technology would eventually catch up to us. But it set a bar so high that we could strive for. If you set a bar too low, then they're dumping all sorts of things into the river. One of the people that I heard talk when I was in Dubai was a lady who is one of the lead experts in India on regenerative farming and organic foods. And I saw her speak, and she said something that I thought was very profound. So she got up and did her presentation. She's written several books. And somebody in the audience said, well, you want all of us to switch to organic farming. Now, you guys have 2 billion people in India. Do you really think that you can feed 2 billion people if everybody switches to organic food? And you know what her answer was? She said, we could feed twice as many people with half the land. I was blown away. Twice as many people with half the land. Well, how do you do that? What do you mean by that? And so she went into it a little bit further. She said, on average, if you look at organic foods, organic food portions, organic food servings, it's 70% higher in nutrients than GMO, than the stuff that we're mass producing. That's why we have to supersize our meals, is because our bodies are still starving for that nutrients that's not in this food, because it's come from eroded topsoil that's just dumped with chemicals over and over and over again. And when we start creating a biodiverse ecosystem on our farmlands and rotating our crops, and not going through and tilling and doing all these things that are horrible. We start leaning more into that. We can feed twice as many people with half the land, with a higher nutrient content food and less chemistry. And all of that, you know, in the long run really helps to reduce the carbon emissions. It reduces all the chemistry that we have to try to pull out of our water.
Formed a phase 2 implementation plan team who are currently working on all those issues, the funding, the technical aspects of it, the operations, and all of those things are currently being looked at by that committee and those experts and those folks who work for the UCUT member tribes. So all of that's ongoing, and we've received the funding to continue to look at those issues.
And what are the issues that what are the issues?
Well, just around. Again, those passage issues as it relates to how the fish utilize the system, where they go, turning adults loose and seeing how they navigate through the system, turning smolts loose and seeing how they go down through and around the dams, and how they interact with that new, those new opportunities of being above those 2 facilities after 80 plus years.
Yeah.
And we've had we've had a lot of success in a sense that those fish are spawning in those areas that we've turned them loose in the main stem Columbia between Chief Joe and Grand Coulee, Rufus Woods. We've got salmon and have had salmon spawning in that section above Coulee at Kettle Falls. They've seen them spawning in the Kettle River. They've actually seen those salmon we turned loose at Kettle Falls up in Canada at Keeneyside Dam. So they haven't forgot. They're again. They're looking for the same opportunities we are, and that's get around those dams and get back up into those traditional territories and spawning grounds, and in general that's been very successful. And the fish again have shown us if we provide them the opportunity, they know where to go and they remember what they're supposed to be doing.
What are some of the new ways of opportunities that you've been able to provide them? I mean, you've done a number of different techniques that.
Well, there's a bunch of new technologies, whoosh for adults, and there's
tell me what
floating
whoosh is.
Whoosh is they call it a salmon cannon. It's basically a tube that's got pressure that it'll help move the fish. You put the fish in there, and it's like a vacuum. It's kind of like that technology at the bank tellers. You push a button and that little tube goes flat. Well, in fish, it's real similar to that. And they go up over, you can do just a lot of different things with a system like that. You can sort fish, you can, we've got predator issues, we've got other issues around. We can deal with a lot of that stuff with that type of technology. For adults, of course, there's trap and haul and some of the older technologies that we'll be using, and then there's floating surface collectors above those facilities that collect the smolts coming down. So it's an attraction flow with the kind of funnels the fish into that, and you can put them in a trap and move them around that facility and then turn them loose downriver. So those are some of the basic technologies we've been using to move fish around. It's time to really look forward and to quit living in the past like this stuff's always going to be there, because it's not. And I think that's an important part of the fig tree. My responsibility is talking to people about that, sharing those stories, that knowledge, connecting people, talking about it in that broader sense that these opportunities.
But you've got to talk to. I mean, you're doing what we're doing with the fig tree. You're having to talk to people in different cultural or scientific or economic milieu. You've got to talk with the farmers concerned about irrigation, with the people that are concerned about transportation through the river, with people who are concerned about electrical power, with people. I mean, you've got to come up with the economic reality of this is an economic dynamic too that we have to consider, and I think so often people don't see that.
And we commissioned that along with Columbia River Tribal Fish Commission and Upper Snake River Tribes and some nonprofits. We commissioned that economic evaluation of the entire Columbia River Basin, and that's currently on our website, and it talks about those in that sense, built capital, natural capital, and the importance of those two existing together. So if your natural capital starts to deteriorate, all your built capital becomes basically useless because you got nothing to run through it or put through it. So making that connection and actually showing those economic values that the ecosystem provides like $190 billion annually, and they're always touting power as the big revenue generator on the system. Power is at like 3.3 billion annually. So the economic opportunities through the environment are 190 billion, and through power production up and down the river it's 3.3 billion. We're just looking to, again, swing that pendulum more into the center. We understand that we live in those same, areas. We deal with the same issues that we live in the poorest counties in the state, and we have all these opportunities, right? As that's one of our boundaries is the Columbia River, and we have all these opportunities to correct some historic wrongs that provide benefits again for all of us, spiritually, culturally, economically. It's the time's right, and we're running out of time, so it's time to seriously take a look at that. And I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 10 to 15 years in that sense, that we received $200 million from the Biden administration as it relates to studying salmon passage in these areas over 20 years. So people are seeing the importance of it, the need, and again, those economic opportunities, and more importantly, those spiritual opportunities, reconnections for tribal folks as well as everybody else who lives along, who comes to visit the entire Columbia River Basin. It's one of the most beautiful things that we've that we have.
Yeah.
And it's important to me that we leave that for those future generations.
Yeah. Yeah.
For for those folks we haven't met yet.
Yeah. Your great-granddaughter and
My great-granddaughter.
And her great-granddaughter.
And her great-granddaughters and her granddaughters.
right.
And all of
Right.
that,
Right.
And it's time, Mary, it's time. We
Yeah.
the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we're so close to making some changes in here in the region that will benefit those future generations. And it's my responsibility, it's our responsibility to, while we're here, do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Good. Good. Thank you.
And thank you.
It's UCUT.org.
UCUT, UCUT.org.
And they can get the economic studies.
The economic studies there.
And the video that you just produced.
Some older videos. There's just a lot of really good information about the member tribes and what we're working on, what the individual tribes are working on. So yeah, visit UCUT.org.
And the 5 tribes that you're working with are the
5 tribes are the Coeur d'Alene tribe, the Cobble tribe, the Kalispel tribe, Kootenai tribe of Idaho, and the Spokane Tribe of Indians. We work for nearly 15,000 tribal citizens and manage 2 million acres of reservation lands and influence nearly 14 million acres of Aboriginal territories. And our mission statement talks about our responsibility, and again, for the benefit of all.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.